Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this terrific discussion with the Spanish Ambassador to Canada, Your Excellency Serrano. Ambassador, thank you for joining us today. We are, of course, making this event as part of the 75th NATO anniversary. My name is Danny Horowitz, and I'm the Honorary Solicitor of the NATO Association of Canada. We are a charitable NGO dedicated to informing Canadians about the value of security and the importance of NATO. Thoughts about the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, aka NATO, do not usually occur to Canadians on a daily basis, but the peace, prosperity, and security that NATO provides globally are integral to our way of life. The principle that an attack on one is an attack on all is the foundation of NATO and maintains peace through strength. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the death and destruction that was the Second World War. The collective defense for us and our allies draws its strength through unity and correlation. And of course, division is the main weakness, and we live in a different world today than we did even just a few years ago. So today we're going to be discussing the role of Spain as an ally to Canada and NATO, but this conversation is only one of many that we have planned online and in person across the country and throughout the year. Just a quick note that I hope you will continue to engage with the NATO Association as part of our community via online, whether Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and I hope that you will encourage you, in fact, to join our YouTube channel so that you can be part of future events as well. I'm excited for this discussion personally, and I'd like to introduce our three moderators for today. So please let me introduce to you Bogdana Torbina, Apostolos Zizos, and Marwan El Fayumi. That's it. I'll stay out of the way. I'm going to listen in as an active participant, as an active listener. Those are our moderators for today. They are part of our NATO Association team. I'll send it over to you.
Thank you so much, Danny. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our series of events celebrating NATO's 75th anniversary and the member states of the Alliance. My name is Bogdana Turbina, and I'm an engagement coordinator at the NATO Association of Canada.
Hola, my name is Marwan, and I'm the podcast manager at the NATO Association of Canada.
Hello, I'm Apostolos Zizos. I'm the events coordinator at the NAOC.
We are honored to be joined today by His Excellency Alfredo Martínez Serrano, the Ambassador of Spain to Canada. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, before we get into the Ambassador's opening remarks, I would like to briefly go over his bio for our audience. His Excellency graduated in law after finishing his studies at the University of Oviedo and Pisa in Italy. He obtained a Master in European Union Law at the European Institute of the Free University of Brussels and has completed the program of Public Management and Leadership at IESE in Spain. Since he became a diplomat, he was Chief of Service at the Cabinet of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he was posted always as Deputy Chief of Mission in the Spanish Embassies in Saudi Arabia, Bulgaria, El Salvador, and Egypt. Between 2007 and 2012, he was Deputy Chief of Protocol at the Royal Household of Spain and was appointed as Chief of Protocol at the Royal Household of Spain in 2014. In December of 2021, he presented his credential to the Governor General of Canada as Ambassador of the Kingdom of Spain. With that, Ambassador, we invite you to begin with some opening remarks before we begin with the questions.
Well, thank you so much for your invitation and for opening up your wonderful association, which performs a very remarkable job here in Canada in order to promote Atlantic values. No? And this is precisely how I want to begin. In a very changing and uncertain world, sometimes we need to focus on the immediate conflicts that we are going through. And geopolitically speaking, we are talking about the outstanding importance of the Pacific, which is true when we see the figures. But I have, after studying and making my analysis all around the world, determined that still, in this moment, in this place that we call the Atlantic, you can find certain principles and values that happen to be of paramount importance. That's also why we need to contribute to world peace and to the stability, geopolitically speaking, of the planet, and we need to vindicate the importance of these values. And why do I start with this sentence? Because there's something extremely important. In the middle of this uncertainty and with all the challenges we're going through, probably NATO as an organization and us as part of a civil society will need to remember and to recover the spirit and the foundations of the organization. why was it created, and most importantly, what we need to revitalize. And therefore, we can have definitely a lighthouse from these principles and values that were established at the beginning. And as I'm from Spain, and as I am the ambassador of Spain, there's someone that was a point of reference for me, Javier Solana, who was a Spaniard, Secretary General, as you know, of the organization in 1995 and 1999. And then he was High Representative for Foreign Policy of the European Union. And let me share with you that while I was getting ready to this wonderful discussion, I was reading his memoirs, his biography, written actually by him, and he was establishing one issue. Look, when I was at the very beginning of my life, I was a moderate Marxist, and I discovered through my personal evolution the incredible aspiration and ambition for shared freedom. And this was also the origin of the organization. If you see one of the major and front runners for it, the then Minister of Foreign Affairs of the United Kingdom that had been involved in the Labour Party, and they reached the conclusion several years after, and after a personal evolution, that freedom needs to be as a natural aspiration in the middle of the political projection of our countries. And both of them, of course, became probably one of the most important people on favor of NATO. And I want to state that because in this place, which is the Atlantic, and I include also Latin America, by culture, we have this attachment to certain principles that on this time should be defended because they are universal. So this means that they can be shared by a lot of nations that feel definitely closer together when they have a challenge to the concept of freedom, democracy, and rule of law. Once I have said that, it is very important to know in my explanation and the dialogue with you that geography and history are going to be very much present in my thoughts. One of the assets of NATO is unity and cohesion, but within it, we are going to see different sensitivities. And on many occasions, in order to understand them, you will see that geography, that is, at least in my life, becoming more and more important, as I was underlining, but also history, that, as Mark Twain put it, doesn't repeat itself, but it rhythms, are very much present too. And Spain is situated at the end of a peninsula that we call Europe, with so many people speaking different languages, and that at the end is definitely having a certain personality in each of its nations. And ours is the result of a huge mixtured result of history and geography. We feel extremely close to the Mediterranean and to the Arab world. We're one by vocation. I have reached this conclusion by traveling with His Majesty all around the world, one of the most Atlantic countries in the world, because we are there at the edge. And as you can see, this projection has been natural to us. So I'm telling you this because this is going to be very much present. And there's a third issue that I would like also to tell you, which is that Spain has a huge commitment as Canada, and this is bringing us together, to multilateralism. And when you study the international scene and you do it in a very precise and scientific manner, you will see that it's highly unlikely to find two countries, such as Canada and Spain, that are more coincident in their trend of voting in international organizations. It is a very interesting exercise, but we see that multilateralism, which is coming from a very principled policy, very much aligned with the Charter of the United Nations and the belief that integration is important, therefore, through the strongest alliance in military terms of the world, such as NATO, and in our case also, in a very remarkable way, such as the European Union, are definitely a point of reference. So those are the three perspectives that I would like to enhance. And then you will see through all the Q&A that Spain is a highly committed member with the present and the future of NATO, and that it is an organization that, from my perspective, has been revitalized in the current circumstances, especially by the war of the Ukraine, but it is here to stay and to play a role for world stability and peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opening remarks, Ambassador. April 4th, 2024 marked 75 years of NATO ensuring the collective defense of its member countries. Spain joined the alliance on May 30th, 1982. This year will mark Spain's 42 years in the alliance. Can you please talk a little bit about the history of Spain joining NATO, the ways in which Spain's role within NATO has changed since its accession, and how you see Spain's contributions evolve in the future?
It's a wonderful question. And let me tell you that we have a very interesting history in our relation with NATO. You mentioned that in 1982, we became the 16th member of the now 32 members alliance. And we went through a very long process. And look how this is going to be linked to what I have started to explain when I was talking about freedom and democracy at the very beginning. In 1953, after the devastating civil war in Spain in the 30s, having a dictatorship, we started to establish a very privileged and unique relation with the United States. And several agreements were signed. And just after that, on several occasions, the then dictatorship that we had in Spain applied and tried to join NATO. There were several technical agreements signed. But the answer was no. And why? Because we were not a democratic state. It is true that the economic development and the military and defense development of the country was extremely important, but we needed to wait till the beginning of the transition in 1975 to change the nature of this relation. The negotiations started, they were finished, we joined NATO, and we did it also in a process in which there was a huge social debate in Spain. The circumstances were different, and normally you found all around Europe a feeling very much pushed forward by the Marxist parties, close in that Cold War to the Soviet Union, that were very critical regarding the organization. We persevere. At that moment, Prime Minister Felipe González, a true leader for the nation, submitted a consultation to a referendum. It was won. We joined fully the alliance with several nuances regarding the nuclear development and the military structure. And then the process started as a very active member with a huge commitment by Spain, participating in all the missions and being involved with a certain political leadership that came to an end, and I must underline, with the full inclusion in the military structure as a full and great member of the alliance in all its dimensions in 1999. Since then, Spain has been playing an incredible role also on the military side of the alliance. And as you know, we have celebrated the 40th anniversary in 2022 with the Madrid summit, the adoption of the new strategic paper, and the inclusion of several concepts that for our security and defense policy are of paramount importance. Just having reviewed a little bit the history, I can tell you that right now you can find an incredible consensus of Spain, which is also in our society about NATO activities, and we are very much in favor of the alliance. We consider it to be one of the pillars of our multilateral approach in favor of stability and peace, but also on security and defense policy. And the most important thing that I would like to tell you is that Spain has also been adapting itself to the evolution of the geopolitical context of the world. So in 1989, I will never forget that night between November the 8th and the 9th, when the Berlin Wall fell down, a full generation of Spaniards reached the foregone conclusion that NATO is part of our own essence. And on the other hand, you can see how people like Javier Solana has occupied the highest positions as an official within the organizations, which is a clear proof of this great evolution. No? We are therefore a very reliable partner to this regard. And then tackling one of the parts of your question, which is very important, how do we see our contributions from this essential part in the future? Growing and with a very highly committed approach. And I need to tell you that we're going to provide NATO with three different dimensions. We understand that it's a North Atlantic organization on security and defense. But one of the things is that Spain, I was describing it geographically and historically as a country very much open to the world and with a universal vocation. So we want to introduce within that framework, which is actually essential for the existence of the organization, it is what it is, the huge, definitely trends that we are witnessing in the world. Digital and technological revolution, how we are going to adapt this structure, sustainable development, neighborhoods, because for us, as I was mentioning, the projection towards the Mediterranean, and especially the attraction with clear arguments and a solid and coherent approach, and insist on that, of the global South, and a 360 dimension and our views towards the world is essential. And of course, with huge and loyal commitment with our allies and involvement in all the international missions that will be requested from us. And we are very active in this dimension. So we are going to grant definitely this Spanish vision within the organization in a very clear and substantial process to tackle the next challenges.
Thank you, Ambassador. You mentioned that in 2022, Spain marked 40 years and held the Madrid Summit of 2022. So during the summit, Spain secured official recognition by the alliance of potential threats to Europe coming from Northern Africa. NATO's new strategic concept warns the situation in the Middle East, North Africa, and the Sahel regions, quote, provides fertile ground for the proliferation of non-state armed groups, including terrorist organizations, and enables destabilizing and coercive interference by strategic competitors, a reference to the growing presence of Russia and China in those areas. Can you please elaborate on the developments since and talk about what Spain is doing to support stability in the region? What more should be done by NATO members?
Well, that's one of the issues that is linking us to what I was stating before. Ukraine is an essential challenge, but in this world, everything is connected. So do not hesitate for a sec that there's not a connection between what is happening in the Middle East with Ukraine, what will happen in the Strait of Taiwan, and what is going on in the Sahel on North Africa. Those places of the world are essential for the future of stability, and geopolitically speaking, part of the struggle will be how to work together. So we prefer to talk about Southern Neighbourhood, and we feel it very closely. Those are very important countries. But let's just run more technically on this issue. Spain introduced, of course, this 360 vision in the debate. We presented several initiatives, always, and I need to stress this factor, highly conditioned by our major priority, because we cannot refuse one idea, which is that Russia is the major threat for NATO countries and for European security right now. But nothing can be seen as two different pillars in contradiction, but they are complementary. And unless you will have that vision, you will not be able to understand the path towards the future. If you look at the Sahel, and Bogdana, I'm going to be very clear with you. Sudan is in the middle of a civil war. I can explain to you quite in detail what is happening with the Russian and Chinese influence in Niger and of course in Mali and Burkina Faso. The regimes and the nature that we have, of course, politically speaking, in Central African Republic and in Chad. The challenges, of course, of North Africa, we need to be very close together and to try to support them. But with certain issues that we will need to observe: migration, Islamist terrorism, which is also a huge threat for those countries. We can never forget economic problems, climate change. They are going to be there, and most especially the situation in the Middle East. So from that perspective, Spain, of course, tried to launch a reflection process, which has been actually going on. We have an incredible document on Southern Neighbourhood. We need to reactivate, even financially and politically, the means that we already have in order to focus on the region. But we need also to pay attention in an open dialogue, establishing certain proposals that will be discussed in the next summit in Prague. And of course, we want to reach with a more clear proposal the summit in Washington, in which we are going to commemorate this 75th anniversary in a very active manner. I think the discussion needs to be global to this regard. And then, on the other hand, we can never forget that as everything is linked, this should be made with wider discussions. And there are some proposals that are very concrete, such as the appointment of a person responsible to carry on the relation with this southern neighborhood, and to be able to be very much present in the institutional framework that the region is also offering us. So increasing definitely our security capabilities regarding the region is something essential, but most importantly, to go through the path of dialogue, cooperation, and a very solid relationship.
So, Spain's geographic locations positions the country in a crucial geopolitical region, especially with the Russian invasion in Ukraine and the escalating war in the Middle East. What is Spain's foreign policy towards all these threats? Can Spain have any role in mediating any of these conflicts?
Well, just to sum up a little bit our positions regarding Ukraine, for us, this is an essential challenge towards the future, and I think it is the most important threat to the alliance and also to us, because we are an active member and we feel, let me tell you this, also geographically close and ideological and politically close to the Ukraine. We have condemned from the very beginning this appalling war of aggression as illegal and as unjustified. We have contributed from the financial, the humanitarian, the political, and the military way in a very active manner. We are putting all our means in proportion to our budget and our involvement. And we are, of course, very much in favor of preserving the territorial integrity, the sovereignty, and the right of Ukraine to decide on its own future and to what organization the Ukraine wants to belong. So our position is the same that the Canadian one. There's not a single nuance to this regard, and we will be supporting Ukraine as long as it takes and as much as it will be needed. Regarding the Middle East, in the Middle East and the Gaza situation, we have condemned the attack by the terrorist organization Hamas that took place on October the 7th, and we are calling for the immediate release of the hostages. But not only that, we assert that Israel has the right to defend himself. There's, of course, one important nuance. They do have this right within the framework of the international law and international humanitarian law. And we request for the presence, of course, of a ceasefire as soon as it could be possible, and for the humanitarian support of the civil population and the preservation of lives. And I'm going to be very clear. Everything is coherent from the Spanish perspective. If you have a multilateral position, if you believe in international law, one of the things that we really need to prevent from happening are lack of coherence and double standards. Because at the midterm, this is going to strengthen our own positions in something that we need to look ahead, no? And Spain is very important, which is how to live in peace and stability in this changing world. We are not still in the Third World War. And what we want really, because we are surrounded by a circle of fire, to establish connections that will be building up bridges and making this peace and stability possible to the mid and long term, because those are the principles of the UN Charter to which Spain is very much attached. We have proposed, and I go straight to the mediation, and we think that we have the capacity, especially in the Gaza conflict, as right now what we're seeing, the Ukraine is not granting us the conditions for this negotiated solution yet, but in the Middle East issue, and especially in the Gaza situation, we have proposed already the celebration of a conference. This has been endorsed by the 27 member states, and we have more than 90 actors between states, and also the Arab League and the Islamic Conference have definitely adhered to this proposal to to celebrate this conference that will have a goal, and this is what we defend, which is to reach the two-state solution, which has been admitted in all UN doctrine, in a very clear manner, which is an independent Palestinian state with an independent and living in safety Israeli state, with a corridor between the West Bank and Gaza, fully guaranteed with access to the port, and within the framework of exerting solidarity with the Palestinian people. Because we think that if you increase solidarity with Palestine, that is the best investment for Israeli security to the mid and long term. And of course, I think it is a need for international community to go towards this path of peace.
Yeah, definitely. And regarding to stability, Spain will begin the deployment of 700 soldiers that will form the battle group of the NATO mission in Slovakia from July 24th, 2024, to strengthen NATO's eastern flank. Can you discuss a bit about Spain's objectives in this mission and why it chose to lead this mission?
Well, this is very important, no? Even if we will be discussing this in another point, the contribution of Spain to NATO is extremely active. Right now, we're going to reach in July, more or less 3,400 soldiers deployed in different operations. And within the framework of NATO, we will be close to 1,800. One of the key issues is that we are participating in several operations. You know that there are 8 battle groups, and Spain has started to deploy, as in January, 700 soldiers progressively till reaching July in Slovakia. So we're going to exert the responsibility on one of the battle groups to its full extent with 250 vehicles. And there's something very important just for you to know, because you are the NATO association in Canada, and we are working in a lovely and wonderful manner with this wonderful country of yours in Latvia, with 600 people right there and several material of security and defense deployed in that country. But we will add this command in Slovakia. Why are we there? And I'm going to be very clear. First, because we have a firm commitment with the allies. I was telling you, the situation in Ukraine touches all of us. Do not introduce nuances. If you want to be coherent, what we need to do is to be very clear of what is happening right there. And the main challenge for NATO is Russia at the current moment and the appalling aggression against the Ukraine. So we're going to be there to support our allies. That's the main motivation. Secondly, we want to put our capacities at the service of NATO missions. And Slovakia is a country that definitely has a border with Ukraine, and we need to be as a measure of deterrence, and we need to be working with these allies in this interoperability that is making NATO stronger every day that goes by. Do not forget this concept. NATO is based in solidarity, and sometimes we forget about it. So we need to contribute in a very fast-forward way. So those are mainly the 3 reasons that we have as a huge motivation. And we want our country to be present as 7th contributor, as we are to NATO. And let me tell you that when I was working also at the Royal Household, I could experience the brilliant talent of the Spanish armed forces. And the way in which they perform in every single mission introduces this very professional approach, this seriousness, and also this sensitivity towards local populations. So I'm positive already that this mission is going to be a huge success, not only externally serving to its main goal, but also internally to bring NATO countries together.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you that, and I wanted to reference that published statistics show that Spain as the 7th largest NATO contributor to military expenditure at $19 billion, and Spain's fall short of the 2% GDP benchmark, spending around 1 to 1.5 in recent years. What is your country's stance on the NATO headquarters emphasizing the importance of meeting this benchmark, especially given the pressing ongoing global conflicts that we've talked about today?
Well, this is a question that I'm very glad to listen to. What we will be doing is a huge effort in order to achieve the goals that were established in the Summit of Wales in 2014. So this year, we are climbing from 1.24 of the GDP to 1.30, and this will be progressive till the 2% goal, which has already been accepted by Spain in 2029. You can see that Canada has presented also its own strategy. So the trend of growth and the establishment, of course, of this policy is fully made, and we will reach this 2% goal. But we can never forget something that you have anticipated, which is the global amount. Among 32 countries, we are the 7th contributor. And not only that, but the way in which you do it. So we insist that much more than the figures regarding the GDP, there are two issues that need to be taken into consideration. The first one, and look, this is essential, is how you apply or implement your means regarding the missions, and how you put, and this is the second, your capabilities at the service of the organization. So in this, Spain is highly committed. As I was mentioning, we have an incredible deployment in several missions of NATO. Many of them are actually associated to the conflict in the Ukraine, and we will continue to do so from that perspective. And there's something that is also, from my viewpoint, even more important that we need to review, and I had, of course, several figures right here, but Spain has an impressive industrial capacity as far as defense is concerned. So we could talk that we are the 7th or the 8th exporter in the world. We have, for instance, some contributions to the organization and to several countries on defense industries, and this technological reputation that is absolutely essential and very linked to our history is also an asset that we are going to put at the service of our allies and to the organization, such as the F-110 frigates, the submarine S-80, or the VCRs or the Pizarro armor vehicles, Spanish-made and designed.
Thank you. That actually is a great segue into my next question, which is, as you've mentioned, Canada and Spain have comparable population sizes and comparable military expenditures. Canada is around 26 billion, where Spain is around 19 billion. Yet the Spanish force boasts almost double the manpower and now ranks their Canadian counterparts in land, air, and naval equipment power. What are some of the successes of the Spanish military that you think Canada can draw lessons from, and so it can strengthen its security forces and its contributions to the alliance?
Well, it's a very good question, and let me tell you that in a very candid and frank way, I'm a diplomat, and I can assure you that normally we try to prevent from bumping into comparisons due to obvious reasons. But in this case, I will do them because I have gotten to know your armed forces and also your defense culture in Canada. And I have met some incredible people. We get along so well, as we have seen in Latvia, and we have seen that, of course, from our perspective, this exchange of viewpoints is enriching both countries and also our military men. Probably just going straight to the point, we can learn a lot of things from you, especially your northern approach that has been ratified, for instance, in the strategy, the way in which you deployed. Canada has an impressive tradition of involvement in international mission and a very, I would say, high degree of integrity and projection at international level of its defense culture. You can be extremely proud of Canadians, so we are learning a lot from you too. From our perspective, what I can tell you is that probably there are two issues in which we could exchange viewpoints and we could provide you with our experience. One is procurement, how you speed up the acquisition of goods at military level. From that perspective, Spain is quite an efficient country. And the second is this industrial capacity, which is something that we need to incentivize and in which we will be able to share things. We're working together already on those fields, and we are doing it in a very efficient manner. And once again, let me underline the importance of this men-to-men relation, women-to-women relation in our armed forces, with certain ideas that are very clear in our defense policies that are bringing us just to a different level, because this coincidence in Latvia has been extremely important, but we work together in all the international organizations of defense, and NATO is the key meeting point for both countries and for our military men.
Before we head into the Q&A, I was wondering if you could answer one final question. As we've wrapped up in that final remark a little bit about the importance of the alliance, I wanted to highlight, as we've mentioned, that there are so many challenges that NATO is facing at the moment. And I wanted to ask you, what is a significant weakness that you recognize in the alliance? And what are some of the what could be a response to some of those challenges?
Well, it's a very wide question, but very interesting, no? What I firmly believe is that coming to these foundations is going to be extremely important. But how is the world evolving will give us a grasp on what we need to focus. If you analyze the relation right now that we have, the biggest threat at immediate level definitely is the Russian aggression against the Ukraine. So we need to focus at the short term in that. But then we need also to focus on the geopolitical evolution of the world. As I was underlining, we're not still in World War III. There are many factors that can be worrying, and we need to be ready from that perspective. But we don't need to reach a foregone conclusion about conflict, but we need to build up all the solutions in favor of peace and stability. Right there, we need to pay attention also to the evolution of China in this moment, and also to something which is in third place essential, that we need to focus in midterm, but also in the long term, which is what we do with ourselves. To keep cohesion and unity, to provide, and do not ever forget that, this unity and cohesion to 1 billion people to whom we are offering in 32 countries, 1 billion, all the defense and security approaches is of paramount importance. And this is something that the audience need to know. Keeping unity inside and focusing on things in a very harmonious way. And this anniversary is granting us the possibility to enhance what we have achieved. What a successful organization. From the very beginning to 32 members nowadays, and with this enlargement in population and countries. Fourth issue, we need to look at the challenges of the future. How we are going to insert NATO in the digital and technological revolution. Cybersecurity, misinformation, disinformation are going to be at the heart of the agenda. How do we establish a constructive relation with the so-called global south? Another fifth challenge. How we are going to pay attention with a solidarity defense culture to all the countries that are in our southern neighborhood. So these 6 assets, from my viewpoint, should be at the top of the agenda. And then, especially, we need also, because I am a European, and Spain is the more pro-European, with a European vocation country of the EU, how we are going to establish this relation also in a changing moment for the world, in which we are all focusing on US elections. So as you can see, I'll be very open. We have several questions that we need to manage. And at the end of the day, I think that people that follow an association like yours, and also the audience that is following us, can find some food for thought in these reflections.
Well, thank you so much for your inputs, Mr. Ambassador. And with that, we bring a moderated discussion to a close. I wanted to open the floor for any Q&A questions you guys might ask in the YouTube live chat. I have a few that I would like to reference right now. So, a first question, and I'm just going to read the direct quote is, could Your Excellency provide insights into any ongoing discussions or collaborations between NATO and Frontex regarding migration-related matters?
Well, this is something in which I'm going to be extremely frank. It's an important issue because at the end of the day, Spain, of course, is a country at the south of the Mediterranean. And when we're talking about migration, there are 2 things that I would like to underline. Migration has become a security and defense issue because it's being used on certain occasions politically as a threat. And we have seen what has happened in Belarus and with the border of Poland, and we have seen this affecting other member states. So the first example that I would like to put on top of the table is that the coordination among agencies and try to evolve from a very at the beginning of this century, sovereign policy on migration to an integrated policy of control. And the agencies, Frontex, of course, so closely linked to the European Union, but also with several agreements already with our countries, and also what we are including in the reflection political papers of the alliance are the key examples that something is a point of inflation and has come to a change. And my perspective, at personal level, when I was reading the other day a wonderful article by a Spanish scholar to this regard, is that migration is going to be more and more present in the political debate within NATO and more present on the security pillar. So those are clear examples, the one I have mentioned in the Polish border, but also what is happening with the southern neighborhood, to which we will need to pay attention. By the way, let's be clear and do not ever criminalize migration, just the opposite. Spain received last year more migrants than Canada. And we are two countries that are called in the future, due to our approach to a multicultural system, diversity and inclusion, knowing very well and very much aware that migration is a source of richness for a society. But we cannot be naive. And that's why we need these concrete tools, agencies, common policies, common political approaches to things to tackle that migration will be legal, fair for the migrant, and secure. And this is in which NATO can provide also a lot of elements as far as the observation on terrorism and on stability are concepts that have been, of course, very much present in a solid way in all the debates of the North Atlantic Council.
Thank you for that answer. I wanted to move on to a topic that you briefly, quite extensively actually discussed, but there is a specific question about what is Spain's position on the EU's new European defense industrial strategy, and will self-sufficiency in the European defense industry create tensions between non-EU allies and EU members?
I don't see it that way, and I'm going to be very straightforward. Once again, why do we put things in a clear dialectical contradiction when they are complementary? Europe can provide and needs by itself, especially in this scenario, a development of its industrial capacity in defense. During many years, and this is the situation, the sector was deteriorating. And there is an initiative that you have mentioned in a very knowledgeable way that has been launched in order to establish two things. What we need to do, and this refers to everything, is duplicity or lack of efficiency. And sometimes when we are contributing to Ukraine, and this is a request also from the Spanish government, we had resources coming from NATO, resources coming from the European Union, resources coming from individual states. They contribute in an essential way. But if you want to manage these resources, you need to be coherent. And Europe needs to have an efficient industry of defense. And now, in which like-minded countries are called to work together, and you have problems with the supply chain around the world, this kind, of course, of contribution to the alliance can be extremely positive, as Europe is definitely not only, and we are going to put it in a very clear way, a geographical concept, but a political, social, cultural, and economic concept that needs this industry of defense to be at the disposal of everyone. So the important thing is to work together. And if you see the development of this NATO-European Union relation, talking about compatibility, it is amazing the steps forwards that we have been doing. And Europe needs to reach also a certain degree of contribution that can only be taking place, as I was underlining, it has a solid and a strong industrial military consortium.
Thank you for that. There's a question pertaining to the Palestine-Israel conflict at the moment, but you've already given a stance on that. So I would like to move forward with another question. That is, with Spain becoming the framework nation in Slovakia, are there plans to reduce the enhanced forward presence that Spain has in Latvia?
No, everything is compatible. We're going to keep all the missions, and this is an increase. As I was telling you, there are 8 battle groups. We will be where the organization will be requesting us to be, in a very harmonious and coherent presence. And let me tell you that out of these more than 3,000 soldiers that we have abroad, more than 1,700 will be devoted to NATO missions. I need to underline that we are also present in different ways in Romania in a very strong manner with 200 effectives. We have been in Estonia, in Lithuania. So from that perspective, you can count on our commitment, and one thing doesn't exclude the other.
Thank you, Ambassador. I know that the discussion revolved heavily around Spain's role in NATO and contributions to European security. However, we'd also like to ask a question about Canada-Spain relations, as we have very friendly and close diplomatic relations. How would you describe the bilateral relations between Spain and Canada at the time?
They are in one of the most extraordinary moments of history, no? But let me enhance 2 things. The first one, as I'm seeing the huge talent of young Canadians by talking to you, that it is such a pleasure to be a Spanish ambassador right here. There's not a single disagreement. Do you mean, what I try to tell you is that what a pleasure for an ambassador to be working in a country where everything is going on the right direction, without conflict, without challenges. What we have is a huge potential. Spanish and Canadian people like each other very much, and we get along extremely well, but we do not know each other enough, and we have a huge potential to grow. We are the 14th economy in the world. You are in the 9th or 10th. You are a G7 country, but we have societies that get along well, and there's a huge space to be working. So I enhance the value of economic relations, in which we are growing not only in the exchange of trade due to CETA, the preferential trade agreement with the European Union, but also in common investments. This is booming right now. And we have, of course, something very important, which is the presence of Spanish infrastructure and energy companies in Canada on a permanent basis and with a huge commitment of cooperation. When you go to the political dimension, I cannot cover up that if I've been here 2.5 years almost by now, to see that our prime ministers, since the beginning of the mandate, have been seeing each other 10 times, and that the relation between our ministers of foreign affairs is a formidable relation, and that we're coordinating all the time with visits coming in and coming out from the country, is showing clearly that the dialogue is really outstanding. We're going to have bilateral consultations in May in Madrid. We actually follow all the issues, and we are coordinating also on NATO agenda. And then we have something very special. And let me underline that, because probably sometimes when you approach a modern concept of diplomacy, you're not aware of. And we need to change methodology. And this is working among entities, foundations, associations, NGOs, and members of civil society. It is so rich. We have more than 100 agreements among universities. Spanish language is flourishing in Canada with 1.2 million people who are Spanish mother tongue. It is the most requested language. We have an incredible cultural office in the embassy, which is developing an incredible program of activities all around the country. And one of the things in which things are changing is that Spain and Canada are also countries very much attached to science and innovation, which is a sector in which we are very powerful, both countries. We have an association of Spanish scientists right here, and we're working together in order to launch several initiatives within the framework of the program Horizon Europe and Eureka. So as you can see, global relation in every single sector, growing and exploring this potential as Spaniards and Canadians get along extremely well.
That's super, super cool. I might have to try some of those Spanish lessons myself. But one final question. We spoke today a lot about Spain's role as a state in the alliance, Spain's role as a bilateral ally of Canada. I wanted to flip the conversation a little bit and ask one final question about NATO's perception from the Spanish public, from the population, and anything that you might have to comment there.
As I was telling you, the vast majority of the population is very much pro-NATO. No? There are 2 issues that we cannot cover up, because this is really essential to put at the central part of the agenda, because it's happening not only in Canada, but in many member states. We are countries highly committed to a multilateral approach in the international reality, and then we have civil societies that are very active. So one of the issues is how we can persuade, because they like NATO, they know the importance of defense and security policies, but that the spending in defense will be growing when you have a lot of people in the public opinion that prefer to devote these resources to social, health, or educational sectors, for instance. No? And at the end of the day, this is one of the things in which we will need to be highly committed. Recognizing our challenges is recognizing also our strengths. And the world is changing, and it is a moment in which this is something that will be carried on, and your association can contribute it very, very highly towards our public opinions. So to engage and to commit ourselves in a very balanced manner globally with the concept of security and defense needs an increase in defense spending. That's why Spain and Canada have announced in their strategy together and challenging this issue an increase in their budget capacities for the next years. No? So this will be one of the things in the perception of public opinions. And the second, which is very important for both of us, is how we are going to fight misinformation and disinformation. It is not something in relation with security and defense. It's in all the aspects. And we know the impact of advanced algorithms and how the way in which an aggression is carried on has changed in its own nature nowadays in the middle of this digital and technological revolution. And this is having an impact also on public opinion. So these two issues will need to be addressed, and it's one of our major challenges. And I know that from your association, widespreading these North Atlantic values that are at the core of everything will be definitely one major asset for us all.
Looks like this is all what we have time for. We would like to convey our sincerest thanks to you for agreeing to have this conversation and for your thoughtful responses. Mucho gracias. With that,
muchísimas gracias. What a pleasure and what a discovery to meet you through IESE, and sharing these thoughts, as I was telling you from the very beginning, has been really a privilege.
Thank you, thank you. With that, I will now pass it on to our President and CEO, Robert Baines, for some closing remarks.
Thank you so much. Excellency, sorry about that. Excellency, what a pleasure, what a great discussion. And our three moderators, Marwan, Apostolos, and Bogdana, thank you so much. Excellency, I was thrilled to hear all about the the Spanish dedication to NATO. It's always nice to hear these stories from different points of view. Every ally has its own, traveling story to how it got to NATO, how the population feels about NATO. It's extremely important for us to share these stories, because those are the kinds of things that are human. They are the kinds of things that paint NATO as a relationship building organization. As you say, the North Atlantic values have at their base friendship and the defense of our friends. And it's so wonderful to have you, Ambassador, as a great friend of our organization. Also, I was thrilled to hear, by the way, that you're going to tell us the secrets of how to fix our procurement process. I can't wait to hear about that. Not something that's going to be easy, I'm sure, but that's the other great thing about the Alliance, is that we can share these best practices and how to fix certain policies or systems. We're all experimenting with different sorts of this, and that's where I think disinformation obviously comes at a great cost to our efficiency. But one of the things that I'm so glad you're on board with for us is that we are trying to tell a story that can go up against disinformation. We don't want to leave just an information vacuum. We have to tell our story. What is it that we're trying to do? If we don't do that, I mean, disinformation just has a field day, because anybody will hear any old, conspiracy theory and think that it's correct. When in reality, NATO is an amazing organization built off of decades of hard work, and we're honored to be here with you, sir. Spain and Canada marching forth to protect one another and all the rest of our allies. And for those of you who are listening, I'm so glad that you've joined in on our conversation. I hope you'll continue through YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. And Ambassador, I know that you'll be sending this out to your diaspora in Canada. And I hope we have a chance to have some Spanish beer at our next edition of the Beer Festival. Always a good way to get people out to hear about NATO.
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much for your brilliant comments. And what I can tell you is that it has been a personal and institutional pressure to share with you, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, friendship is what is bringing us together. Common values are sustaining us all the time, and our doors will be always fully open up for good allies. And with Canada, we have this extraordinary relation that we want actually to push forward even further. Thank you so much to your association. Congratulations for what you do and how you do it. And we are fully available, and you can reach us anytime. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Excellency, my dear friends, moderators, and audience. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Cheers, Excellency.
Cheers.